Carolina, Clemson, 3:30 on Saturday afternoon. We're on the air at 2:30. And what a moment. Adam's going to be there. Adam's going to do stats and spot for us on the network. Are you fired up?
You're just going to make me nervous if you talk about it.
If I get something wrong, it's because Adam told me wrong.
That's
just
right.
Keep that in mind during the broadcast.
If things go off the rails, spotter.
Yeah. You don't anger Brian Simmons.
I always try not to.
So, okay, Clemson's 6-4. Not a terrible record, but obviously not the record that you're expecting from Clemson, considering how dominant the Tigers have been the last 7 to 10 years. They've been the class of the league. They've been one of the best teams in the country. That's undeniable. Unfortunately for Carolina, I think Clemson's playing its best football from what I've seen through the year. And as we are speaking right now, I haven't been able to break down the all 22 of every game, but I'm about 2/3 of the way there. Here's what Clemson, without a doubt, has. Talent, first of all. You know they're going to recruit at a high level. And their defense is big time. And they're 6th in the country, 1st in the conference in total defense. They're giving up less than 300 yards per game. Man, I mean, they just locked down Georgia Tech last week. And we know Georgia Tech's got a really good offense. And 4 interceptions in the game for Clemson. I mean, they flying around. They're young on defense, with a couple of exceptions like Jeremiah Trotter, who's really good linebacker. But a lot of young players, but really, really talented on the defensive side. So just like last week, I'm excited to see what I think is a really, really good group from Carolina's offense against a really, really good group from Clemson's defense. I think both of those sides will have some moments of success because they're just too good not to. So that'll be fun to watch just from the football perspective because I think they're both really good. Where I think Clemson has gotten better is not necessarily like personnel changes or something on the offensive side. They've just gotten steadier. And in particular, they've stopped turning it over. That really hurt them early in the year. I think most people, if you watched it, certainly remember how that Duke game played out for Clemson, where it had, at different times in the game, had a 1st and goal at the 1, another 1st and goal at the 1, and a 1st and goal at the 7, and didn't score on any of those possessions. They had 2 turnovers and a short missed field goal in those possessions. They've cleaned up the turnover. There was the Florida State game. Remember, they had the lead in the ball and were driving, and that's when Klubnik took that big hit on a sack and fumbled, and Florida State picked it up, ran it back for a score, and that flipped the momentum and changed the way that game felt. Florida State eventually wins in overtime. So they've cleaned some of those turnovers up. They rely heavily on their 2 outstanding running backs, Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, and then kind of work the rest of their offense off of those guys, which is a smart thing to do. They're both really good. Carolina saw how good Cade Klubnik can be last year in the ACC championship game, where he came in and only threw 4 incompletions and torched them. I don't think Clemson's strength offensively is the wide receiver position. I think it's those running backs. And so, Adam, they really build, and they involve them in the pass game, particularly Shipley. They've got a really good tight end in Jake Brenningstool. So, I mean, they work off of those backs and then work the rest of their offense off of those outstanding 2 running backs. So, for Carolina, defensively, you've got to stop the run as best you can. You can't get in these positions where it's 2nd and 4 or 3rd and 2 and Clemson has the whole playbook open. You're just going to get in trouble because they're too good. They're too talented to allow. If they're in that situation, they're going to get you because they've got too many good players. So strength on strength when Carolina has the ball. Again, I think both sides will have some wins in that scenario. It comes down to, in my opinion, can Carolina's defense slow Clemson's offense down enough in this game? If it can, the Tar Heels can win this game. If they don't, it's going to be hard to win a shootout, not because Carolina's offense isn't good enough to do that, but because I think Clemson's defense is too good to expect to be able to go beat them 45-42 or something. I just think you can't expect that.
You never want anybody to get hurt, but it kind of feels like Will Shipley having that concussion opened the door for Phil Maffa, which opened the door for Clemson to almost kind of reconfigure their offensive approach. I can't remember if we talked about this on the air or off the air, but you had said they were a little more side to side, and now they're much more straight ahead, and that has been a much better fit for them. And they've been pretty 50-50 between Maffa and Shipley, to the point that even this week, Shipley said he wasn't quite sure what he's doing next year, which I think is probably what you say when you don't. And he even said, I don't know what kind of opportunities will come my way, which could be professional. It could be at another college. Who knows? So they've divvied that up a little better, and I think that's helped Klubnik some. Their defense is obviously really good. I mean, they held Georgia Tech under 4 yards of play. Georgia Tech got 8 yards of play against Carolina. So that's a bit of a concerning figure. I mean, there's no secret. The Tar Heel defense has got to be better. The Tar Heel defense has got to be better in order for Carolina to go into Clemson and win for the first time since 2001.
The usage of those two backs is almost equal as far as carries. I mean, Maffa's got 126. Shipley has 123. Shipley has 23 catches on the year. Maffa has 16. So, I mean, they are relatively equal in how they are used. Shipley is a little more of the shifty guy and lower to the ground and side to side. Not that he can't run physically, because he can. But Maffa's just such a big guy. I mean, he's similar to Omarion Hampton in size. I don't think he's as fast as Hampton is. But he's that big, kind of powerful downhill back, and they have used those guys well. I feel like Carolina's forced a lot of turnovers this year. Clemson's forced the same amount, 19. They each have 12 interceptions and 7 fumbles recovered as a defense. So equally as good on the Clemson side of things compared to the Carolina side of things as far as turnovers. And, Adam, it has to be said, I mean, it's a really hard place to go play. And you hope that the atmosphere isn't like a deciding factor in the game. But, I mean, Carolina hasn't been on the road a lot this year. I mean, they've only played 2 true road games. Pittsburgh, where, trust me, it was not a difficult atmosphere. And then Georgia Tech, where it wasn't a full stadium. I do think the students certainly got into it and made things hard for Carolina. This is going to be 81,000 people in full force on senior day. Clemson's playing well. Tar Heels haven't won there in a long time. 2001. I just gave Adam a secret answer to the 5-second challenge. Tar Heels haven't won there since 2001. And Mac Brown gave this stat. I haven't fact-checked it yet, but I believe Coach Brown, that Dabo Swinney's 96-9 at home as head coach of Clemson. So they win there all the time. It's a hard place to go play. And while you hope it doesn't play a role, Carolina's got to go and make it not play a role. They've got to be mature enough to handle it, because if you get a little, if there's a little crack there, it can get a lot wider because of how challenging the atmosphere can be.
You're not going to stumble into a win at Death Valley.
Right.
Like, Carolina's won some games this year where we've said, well, the Tar Heels won, and they certainly also learned some things that they need to get better at. You're going to have to play the best you can to win this game, because it's going to be different than any other game you've played because of the atmosphere. I do think Carolina is a little better equipped to deal with that type of road environment because they have a better run game. They have the ability to run the ball down the field, hold on to the ball for 4 or 5 minutes at a shot, and make those people sit there. But you're going to have to do that against a really good defense. You can't expect to just sling it up and down the field and say, we'll just go out and score 50. That's not a viable plan. So I think it'll be a fun game. That's why I'm going. I only go to the ones I think are going to be fun.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, Death Valley? Yeah, sign me up. I'm going to go run down the hill. I did think that was funny. Mac Brown said that he couldn't be the coach because he couldn't run down the hill.
I thought that was funny too. Said he'd have to walk, and he wasn't even sure he could do that.
Well, legitimately,
Yeah.
the hill is steeper than you think it is when you see it in person. Does Clemson not employ coaches of a certain age? Because that does feel like that could be dangerous.
Maybe the assistant coach. I don't know this answer. I'm shooting from the hip here. We know Dabo runs down it because he's first.
And we know they bus around because we've seen it on television numerous times.
Maybe the assistant coaches don't go down the hill. I don't know that answer. I don't know. It will be, I think it's the biggest challenge. I don't care what Clemson's record is. I think it's the biggest challenge Carolina's had this year. I do.
I wish it was in September or October.
Yes. Clemson is playing at a much different level right now than it was then.
It'll be interesting to see kind of what the environment is around Clemson because we've talked about Dabo got mad on his radio show, which still takes live calls incredibly. And so there was some stuff about that. There's been some stuff about some possible coaching things this week. There's been the Will Shipley stuff. There's a lot going on around Clemson that can go one of two ways. Either they put it all aside and say, we're here to play football, or they're distracted. But you don't know until you get there.
Tar Heels have two big things in their favor. The run game and Drake May. This is the best. I mean, Sam Howell never played at Clemson. And he darn near beat him in Chapel Hill with a not as good team. It's the best quarterback I think Carolina's going to be rolling in there with. That doesn't mean Carolina's going to win, but they've got a guy who isn't going to be taken aback. And quite honestly, Drake May didn't play great last year against Clemson. And I'm going to guess, I haven't asked him, I'm going to guess he remembers that. And I'll wrap all this up, Adam, by saying it was Clemson's defense last year that game, it was closer than I think. It got out of hand in the last quarter. That game was not a blowout last year in the championship game. But what happened was Clemson's defense made the plays. 2 interceptions, including a 98-yard return for a touchdown, a fumble recovery that gave Clemson a short field. They blocked a field goal. They had 7 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. Their defense was the dominant force last year. But, I mean, Carolina led 7-0. And then the Tar Heels, it was either, I think it was 7-7 when Drake May and Omari Hampton mishandled a handoff. Clemson landed on it and scored. Even then there was some back and forth. It's 24-10 in the third quarter, and Carolina's deep in the red zone, and the pick six, 98 yards the other way, and that was the game. But, I mean, you scored there. It's 24-17. So that game was not as lopsided as, I think it was 39-10 maybe, that the final score would suggest. And yet, having said that, it was Clemson that made every key play to make the final score what it was. So Carolina can win this game, but it has to play well. It can't have 7 tackles for loss and 4 sacks and 3 turnovers and a blocked field goal. Of course you're going to lose that game. You can't have that again or you're going to lose again. So I'm looking forward to it. I think 2 good teams, Clemson playing better than it was earlier in the year. And again, that matchup between Tar Heel offense and Clemson defense, literally Carolina's offense ranked 3rd in the country in total yards. Clemson's defense 6th in the country. You're talking about big-time side to the ball there. We're on the air at 3:30. We're on the air at 2:30. And game starts at 3:30. Adam will be there. What if we let Adam made his mic hot? We might never get to do another broadcast again.
Sorry, FCC.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. It's been a while. Carolina hasn't been to Clemson in football since 2014. So been a long time since the Tar Heels have been there, and looking forward to it.